I'm Selma Berger, and this is
John Berger. Hi.
we met 67 years ago. Actually, more than that. We were married 67 years, June 22nd. But we met at Long Beach, New York, on the beach. There was a whole big group of young people that used to meet on weekends, and we'd all got to know each other and talk to each other. I was visiting a friend's sister for the week, and John was visiting his brother. Well, we got together, and we all started to write to each other because it was during the war, World War II, and the boys were going into service. And John?
Yes, I enlisted in the Army Air Force in January of '43, and then I finally went into cadet training school at San Antonio, Texas, and graduated from cadet school as a navigator, and they sent me to bombardiering school, graduated from that, and then I became an instructor of navigation during World War II, and I was retired from the service, discharged in August of 1945.
During the time John was in service, I worked in Manhattan. I worked for the Landa Company, which was Elizabeth Post Cosmetics. I graduated high school at 16 and went to work there first thing and stayed there until I left. I was the youngest girl in the office for many, many years because I started at 16. John was in service. I didn't see him much, but we got to know each other through the mail. And he came home once, I think one time. Was it once, John?
Yes. No.
And he gave me his wings, which was a big deal in those days. So we were kind of going together, boyfriend and girlfriend. And he was discharged in...
that was August of 1943.
45.
45, sorry, you're right.
He asked me to marry him, and I said yes. And we got married in June 1947. I was 19 years old. John was 21. And we stayed with my parents, who lived in Jackson Heights, for about 6 months, and then went to Chicago, where John went to
Northern Illinois College of Optometry. And we finished the 4-year course in 3 years because we went to school during the summer, no vacations. Graduated in, where was it, 1950?
I don't have the date down, but
something like that, yeah.
I want to go back and say we were married at the Broadway Central Hotel in New York City. I forgot to mention that. It was a Sunday afternoon wedding. And all his buddies were ushers. And my cousin Selma, who was 2 years older, she was my maid of honor. And then going on, we got married, lived with my parents for 6 months, and moved to Chicago because John got into
Northern Illinois College of Optometry,
which was a three-year course.
It was a 4-year course
done in
condensed into 3 years because we went to school during the summertime. So we got our 4 years worth of college in there.
Of course, we had very little money, so we never got to go home and visit our families. My mother and father and brother came to visit us, and we had cousins in Chicago that used to invite us every Friday evening to their house, so we ate well on Friday. Other than that, I used to cook all night long because I didn't know how to cook. I'd start dinner at 5 o'clock and finish at 10. So it was an all-evening affair till I learned. And John went to school, made some very nice friends that we heard for many, many years. We don't know what happened to them now. When we returned to New York, he attended
Columbia
University
for 1-year postgraduate course in order to qualify for taking the New York State Board exams in optometry to get licensed.
Well, he took it, and he took the New Jersey boards too, and it so happened he got the highest marks ever achieved in optometry at that time when he took in New York when he took the boards.
Yes.
Then when he finished school and got his license, he worked at Herman and Hofberg in Corona, New York, with my father, his father-in-law, Al Levine, who was an optician. We lived in Jackson Heights and had a child, Rhonda, on July 2nd, 1951. We bought a house in 1954. I forgot to tell you about Todd. Our second child, Todd, was was born in March 27, 1956. We both started to play golf at about 1969, and it became important in our lives, and we've been doing it ever since. John opened a part-time home practice in optometry evenings and Saturdays, which grew and grew and became a wonderful practice. He had a very professional practice. We bought an apartment at Glen Eagles Country Club in Delray Beach, Florida in 1988 and moved down here permanently in 1992 and have been here happily ever since.
While we were here, Selma became the first lady golf chairman held her job for 5 years, which was unheard of in most of the golf country clubs. And I was on the Common Area Maintenance Committee as chairman for 6 years. That was for the common area, the property belonging to the country club. And I'm currently in my 20th year as officer of the board in Condo 5, the condominium part in our section of Strathern. We're living here since '92. That's about 25 years already.
We've made many friends here who've become our good friends, usually many years younger than we, because I am now 86, John is 88, and our friends are slowly passing us by into the other world. So we made friends who are 10 to 15 years younger than we, so they're going to be around longer than we. We've had a very happy life here, very productive life. We're busy all the time. We live upstairs. We have a beautiful view from our apartment. And the best part is that our family, my son Todd, his wife Irina, and his 2 daughters, our granddaughters, Simone and Alex, live on the other coast of Florida, and we see them very often. We go for holidays. We've babysat for both girls since they were tiny little ones, and we became kind of a second set of parents. And to this day, we're very close, and which makes us very happy, and it's a very fortunate thing. We didn't have very much money when we first started in West Hempstead. Yes. And he opened the practice with equipment that was good equipment, but that was used equipment.
It was very old equipment. And we had something called a phoropter that you use for lenses to change the prescription. That was our chief instrument for examining the eyes. And contact lenses had just come out recently when I started the practice there, and I needed an ophthalmometer, which is a gadget with a chin rest and a little frame around your face. It goes like this to hold your position of the eye very steady, and you would measure the curvature of the cornea, and you would determine what size and shape contact lens was required. So the instrument I brought home rather, was rather old, so I decided to repaint it. And one of the patients that I had put her face in the machine pressed against it quite hard, and I had done this painting the night before, and I noticed that when she took her face out of the machine, there was a black ring around her face where that instrument held her position, her chin in position to take the measurement. And I didn't know what to say to her. I couldn't say, well, I just painted this old piece of equipment to do this. I said, are you allergic to turpentine? She says, why? I said, well, a little paint from this instrument came off on your face. So I quickly go into the basement and bring in a bottle of turpentine and get it all over the rag, and it has an awful odor. And I wiped her ring off the face. I got it about 90% off. A little bit remained, and she was a good spirit, the patient was, and she said, oh, I don't mind that. That little bit I can get off with soap and water. And we laughed about it for a while.
And now we talk about, are you allergic to turpentine?
Yeah.
Family gatherings. That was one funny thing.
Yeah, so I didn't do that. The next time I painted it, I would make sure it was like 3 days before I would use it again. So I'd do the painting before the weekend and so on.
We have another funny story about John's practice in Corona, Queens. It was a Spanish-speaking practice for the most part. And you want to tell that, John?
Yes. The office was filled and people came in to sit. We had about 10 chairs filled, and Selma's dad was the optician there, and he went over, read the chart, and he would say, Josie?
You're next.
By the first one, Josie, and usually Josie would stand up and walk over, and nobody stood up. So I came out of the examination room because I was busy just finishing up with a patient, and I walked over to Al and I said, it's not Josie, it's Jose. So he says, oh, Jose, and 3 people stood up and came over. He didn't say Martinez at the end.
There was a woman who came in, she wanted to see the Dr. de Bologna.
Yeah.
She was insistent, she was kind of very loud, and she says, I want to see the Dr. de Bologna. Well, we said, there's no Dr. de Bologna here.
Rhonda happened to be in the office taking Molly's place.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she said, no, we don't have a
There's no
Dr.
Dr. de Bologna. Then I walked out of the office.
She says,
and he said, oh,
there's
that's
the Dr. de Bologna.
I said to Rhonda, she means the doctor that belongs here.
And that was the Dr. de Bologna. That was a funny story.
Yeah. Rhonda remembers that one, I'm sure.
Well, we moved to Island Hills, from Island Hills. We belonged to Island Hills Country Club in Sayville, where we played golf. So golf was an important part of our lives. And when we went to buy in Florida, we bought in a community that had 2 golf courses and 22 tennis courts, et cetera, 2 restaurants. And John won all kinds of tournaments, and we both had holes in one. I had won 18 years prior to his. 18 years later, he had a hole in one, and we both had a hole in one on the same hole on the golf course.
Yes.
So that was a very unusual happening. And in 2 minutes, I knew about it, and everybody else on the golf course knew about it. So we've had a lot of fun with golf and a lot of fun with tournaments. We have too many trophies that John won. We don't know what to do with them. And he's still winning, and he's still playing 18 holes of golf, and so am I. Well, I don't know what Todd wants me to say when he doesn't. He's not happy about some of the things.
Remember he broke his ankle or something? He dislocated his ankle and he had a cast. We tried to teach him how to play golf. Being that he's lefty, we transformed him into a right-handed golfer, but with his cast on, he really couldn't perform, so we didn't really follow that up much. We didn't pursue it, no.
Alex,
there was a young girl that came in to sit for Alex one day. She was about 22 years old, and she was crying, and she said, what do you want? She says, I want my sucky. She was about 2 years old, yeah. And she kept saying, my sucky, I want my sucky. So the girl said, what is a sucky? I don't know. So she took her thumb out of her mouth and said, pacifier, and put her thumb back.
A sucky
and
was
she
a
laughed.
pacifier.
She said, how could a young kid like that know how to say pacifier?
And let's see what we remember about
The funny
Simone.
thing about Simone, every time we went shopping, when you were about
yeah.
3 or 4 years old,
Even before.
you would pull everything off the shelves that were
Rearrange.
disarranged and rearranged everything to be in perfect order, like soldiers lined up. And many times the clerks would come over and say, "Don't play with the stuff, you're liable to break the bottles." And I said, "No, she won't, she's very careful." I said, "You have a very disorderly shelf here, and she's only fixing it. You ought to put her on the payroll."
You were very neat about everything in the store. You would sit down on the floor and rearrange it neatly.
And
but some of it was glass, and if you ever dropped it, it would be a problem.
There was one big department store you were in. I think it was one of the ones like
Macy's?
No, I think Target or Macy's.
Oh.
Yeah, it could have been Macy's or Target. And you went over to all the clerks and said, "Did you see my grandma? Did you see my grandma?" And then finally you said, "That's my, did you see my grandma? You could tell she has yellow hair."
Yeah.
It was only blonde, it wasn't yellow. Right? But you were then about 3 or 4 years old, I think.
Yeah.
So she was pretty much of a handful.
Yeah. Tell them about Simone running in the wrong direction when she played soccer.
Oh, yes.
You were
You
a
were
little
5 years old,
about
and
5.
you were on the soccer team.
She was always a very good athlete.
She was a very
Good
fast
swimmer,
runner. Yeah.
fast runner.
Now, Simone was running a ball down the middle of the court, for the soccer court, and then all the kids got in front of the net to block it. So she realized she couldn't kick the ball, so she decided to make a sharp turn to the right and come in from behind the net. And the other kids all got behind her and chased her, but she was faster than them, so she kicked the ball around and came in through the side and then kicked the ball in. And she said, "Oh, I made the point." And then the referee came back and said, "No, it doesn't count because you were out of bounds when you go behind the net." So Simone got herself a point that we think she really deserved, but we couldn't count it. And she was 5 years old at that time.
We started to vacation when the kids got a little older because Molly, my mother, their grandma, stayed with them, and she was very nervous about it, so they were a little older when we started to go on vacation. And we've really been all over the world. We've been to Tokyo, Thailand, Hong Kong, Europe, Canada.
And our best vacation was the golf
Israel.
vacation we went to in Scotland, Ireland, and England.
Yeah, we took a golf vacation with 3 other couples and went from golf course to golf course. We played in Scotland, we played in Ireland, and we played in England, the most famous golf courses. St. Andrews in Scotland, we played it twice. And we had matching TAMs. There were 4 couples that played together. We had mounds of luggage that when we got into Shannon Airport where we landed, we piled the luggage on top of this it was like a bus, and we sang Irish songs as we went to our first hotel, Hotel Europe, which was a beautiful hotel in Ireland. Mm-hmm. And we played golf there, and we had caddies because they didn't have carts.
Yes.
And about the 15th hole, the caddies drop our bags, and they were kids. We asked, "Where are you going?" "They're going to the races." They had races in Dublin, and they had carried the bags for 15 holes, and they would get full pay. So they just dropped the bags, and we were on our own. So we each had to carry our bags the other few holes. And then we went to the races, and behold, they were there betting, which is against the law in the United States, but they bet. Yeah. And John bet with one of these bookies.
I bet $2 as on a 20 to 1 with Paddy McDougal. He was about 4 feet tall, and he had just a
carpet
notebook.
Bag. And a carpet bag.
Yeah, and a little bag.
Satchel, right.
Satchel and he kept money in his pocket as a bookie. So I gave him the $2, and at the end of the race, my horse won. Then the odds were 20-1, so he owed me 40 bucks. So I went over to collect. He says, "I'm sorry, I can't pay you now. I have to wait a little bit till I accumulate some more betting money." He said, "I don't have enough cash." So we hung around for about 2 hours, but I didn't bet anymore. I just waited and kept talking to Patty McDougal, you know. And after about 5 races, he had enough money, and then he paid me off the $40.
But we had to wait quite a while to get that money.
Yeah, we hung around more
Tell
than
them
we
about
wanted
your
to.
experience on the golf course.
Yeah.
Was they caddy setting your ball up in the rough?
Well, at the old course at St. Andrews, the caddies bet on the
Player.
person they're carrying the bag for. And I didn't know that until the end of the round, because at the end of the round, I miraculously kept winning. And my caddy advised me to hit the ball into the rough because the sand traps on the fairway there were too hard to get out of. They were very small and deep and very difficult. If you did get out, you couldn't hit the ball at too long a distance, so it was better strategy. And he was a fast runner. He'd run over, he could find any ball I hit. And it was always in a clear spot where I had a clear swing and sitting up so I could hit the ball easily. So I ended up winning that match. I shot like an 86, which was a very good score for me. And then when they came to pay me, we only bet like $2, but the caddies bet almost the full amount of the $5 or $10 we give them for carrying. So the other 3 caddies said, "We think your caddy's been setting your ball up in the rough every time. That's why he's running over to your ball to find it so fast." So they were all the way on the other side, down the middle of the fairways, and I was always hitting the ball in toward the rough, so it was quite a distance away, and they couldn't really see him that well. But after they explained to me, I said, "Let me talk to the caddy." I said, "I don't want to take your $2 if I didn't win legitimately." So I spoke to the caddy, and I explained that, I said, "These 3 guys say you're cheating and you're setting the ball up for me, and I shouldn't be entitled to win the game." So I said, "Were you setting the ball up? Tell me the truth." So he says, "Sir, tell them 'tis an incorrigible allegation." So I went back to them, and they're huffing and puffing, said, well, what did he say?" I said, he said 'tis an incorrigible allegation. Give me the money. So
Those are the stories. And we played golf in Israel, where the sand traps were raked by Arabs in Arab gear.
yeah,
And
in Caesarea.
in Caesarea, their only golf course. They had a Jewish pro, and they had head covers that were written in Jewish lettering.
Aleph, base, gimel,
Yeah.
daled, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4.
And the greens were rolled sand. That was quite an experience, and it was very, very, very hot. But so we've played in Japan, we played in Scotland, Ireland, England, we played in Portugal, Spain. Where else, John?
You remember remember the pro's name in Caesarea?
No.
Moshe Rosenberg.
Oh.
Yeah.
So a lot of our fun experiences were playing golf on vacation, because now Simone loves to go on vacation and do things, and so did we. So she comes by it naturally. We didn't want to just come and sit by the pool. We wanted to be busy and do things, and she's carried on that tradition. Sometimes to her father's. He was upset about it because she makes him ride the mountain bikes wherever she goes. He's not as good at it as she is. So, but he's a good sport and he does it.
Do you remember the rope bridge that we had to cross over the, where was it, in one of the Danish countries?
Was it Switzerland? No,
it was a smaller. I think it was near Bergen, something like that.
Norway? Norway,
Well, we went
maybe.
to Norway and Sweden, one of those. Probably in Norway. The golf course was not marked the way traditionally they're marked in normal courses. So there was no number 1 hole in it with an arrow pointing to number 2, because you had to walk through the homes and the private properties.
Little villages.
Yeah, but the very first hole was a par 3 over water that had a rope bridge. So you'd have to hit the ball over the water and be on the green, otherwise you'd lose the ball. And we didn't have enough balls. Each of us were given 3 balls apiece. And that's all we had. So we asked Selma, who was the worst golfer in our group, not to hit on this hole. Because
save the ball.
She would lose the ball in the water, but we could all be on the greens, you know, but not her.
So all 3 of them hit the ball in the water, and they let me go last, and I hit the ball on the green. So that showed them. That was a very worthwhile shot I had.
Yes.
But playing golf in all these countries was quite an experience.
In Spain.
In Spain.
Remember, we had the caddies wouldn't pay attention to the girls, to the women. We just went with the fines then, right?
Yes.
Just the 2 of us. So we played as couples then. So the caddy always found my ball and went after me, never looked for her ball at all. Except once she hit the ball into a little stream and there was a snake in the water. So the caddy didn't want to go in the snake. He found a little 4-year-old kid nearby and told him to go in. And I heard him say, no, no, serpento, serpento.
There's a snake in the
water. He wouldn't
He didn't
go.
want to go.
And then he finally spoke to the guy, and the kid wouldn't go. So he had to go down. He took the club and fished the ball out of the stream without getting bitten by the snake. That was a funny bit too.
So that was it.
Oh, we went to Hungary, remember, and in Budapest. I was the interpreter for the group of travelers on the bus. They had 43 or 44 passengers that came from America, and I was the only one who could speak Hungarian. And the fellow at the hotel, there was not the guide, the manager at the hotel we checked into was able to speak English very well. So he spoke to us in English, and then I said to him, "Do you speak Hungarian?" He said, "But of course, this is Hungary. Of course I speak Hungarian." So then I spoke Hungarian to him, and we had a conversation. And then we asked him about what shows we should see, and he said, "See the horse show. It's the best one around." But that was also announced by Hungarians, and they didn't speak English. So I interpreted what they were explaining about how the horses were trained by the riders by snapping their whip very loudly to sound like a shotgun, and they were trained not to react or
I think they
went
down. They bent down on their knees.
They were taught to crouch down,
right,
and they would hide behind bushes, and then they would train them to do that by just snapping the whip to have the same sound as a rifle shot. So when they were fighting these wars, these people became known as the Ghost Riders, the Hungarian ghosts, because they'd be shooting, and especially against the Turks and so on. And they would find that when a few shots were fired, they would shoot like that because all other horses would stand up, and they'd find them and then be able to have a good target. But the Hungarians' horses were trained not to do that. So they'd have to be kicked in the ribs or something to get them to stand up. And then when they were finished shooting their ammunition or reloading, then they would get the horses to stand up, and then they'd shoot and have the advantage and kill the opponents. And that's how they got the name the Ghosts, the Hungarian Ghost Riders. So that was all explained in Hungarian, which I had explained to the Americans.
I want to tell Simone about our ladies that I play golf with for 15 years. I'm head honcho. I take care of these gals. I put them in foursomes so that they play with different people every week, and we have little tournaments, and I've been doing it for 15 years, the same ladies. So the ladies were my friends. Not only were they players that played together every week, we had lunch together every week, and they became very good friends. And we're still wonderful friends. Not only have they taken me on, but my family. When Simone comes to visit, they hug and kiss her, and Alex not as often, but they met her once or twice. So they've become better friends to me than my old friends who are now dying off. And so these gals are about 15 years younger than I am. And we just love each other, and they're very good friends to me. They help me and do things for me all the time.
When I was stationed in, near the end of the war, a few months before it ended, I was stationed in Bakersfield, California, where they had a little area teaching. They made me an instructor. That's how I got there. And I was teaching some of the flyers who returned after they had 40 or 50 or 60 missions. And they would come back and they'd have to get trained in the new equipment. There was a brand new radar and sonar equipment, and we had to learn how to change the 100 fuses within 10 seconds after there was some defect showing on the scope of the screen, of the radar screen. And one of the students that I had was a brigadier general who had about 70 missions, and he was the most experienced and the highest rank navigator that we had. So the purpose of the instruction was really to get one person to be both a navigator and a bombardier, that they wouldn't have to use two people. Like the crews consisted of a pilot, a navigator, and a bombardier, 3 separate people. So the new scope would enable one person to be a bombardier and a navigator, and that was one of the reasons I found that they sent me through both bombardiering and navigation school to become an instructor. And the basis was that you were allowed 10 seconds to locate any defect, so they would create defects in the screen reception, and you were given 10 seconds to find the faulty fuse and replace it. And we didn't know why that was so necessary, but after several months of training on that thing, we found out that the new plane that they had used for the first time, the B-29, had compression in the cabins, and they could fly 30,000 feet above ground. The existing planes that we originally were trained on only flew about 10,000 feet above the ground, which made them susceptible to being hit by flak from the ground. And they wanted to avoid the flak by building a special plane that could go 30,000 feet up, but nobody ever said anything about carrying an atomic bomb in there. And then later on we found out that the crews that they were choosing and trying to decide on, one of them was chosen to fly the Enola Gay, which was the first B-29 that carried an atomic bomb. Then I realized that it was top secret information, and that nobody really knew what it was about, but I was not chosen as one of the person to fly that, but they did get some very experienced people who came back and did pretty well with their knowledge. And they did a good job when they dropped the bomb, and they were certainly out of range of their existing flak. And that was just before the war ended, where they dropped the bomb in Hiroshima.
So you almost were the crew that dropped.
Well, there were about 10 crews there being trained.
One of those 10.
Yeah.
You were one of the 10.
But they never told us a word about
right.
it. No.
When we lived in Chicago, in this 3rd floor of a 3-floor apartment building.
That's when I was first a student in
At
Northern
optometry.
Illinois College of Optometry.
And it was hot as the devil up on that third floor. And we had a Murphy bed, so we couldn't pull the bed to the window. And there were just 2 windows and a tiny little kitchen, which had no window. And I didn't know how to cook. I was all of 19 years old, younger than Alex is now. And so I used to cook all night long. I used to make chicken, then I would make potatoes, then I would make a vegetable. So it took me all night to make dinner. One night, we decided to go to the movies, and I put up a chicken. And we forgot to turn the oven off. And we went to the movies. And we came home, and we found a little pygmy chicken in the oven.
Shrunken head chicken.
Shrunken a little tiny chicken.
It must have been cooking for 4 hours.
Lucky that it didn't cause a fire.
Yeah.
But those were the years that my neighbor used to, she used to clean and drink. She would always have the vacuum in one hand and her drink in the other. But she was very nice to me. She knew I didn't know much about cooking, and she would offer me a dinner every now and then when I'd come home from work. But and we made many friends from school, because John had schoolmates that we became friendly with. And 2 of them moved into our building subsequently because we were there and we got them apartments. So they all 3 got together. Dad bought an old jalopy with a...
Yeah, well, you worked in an office, and the husband of the girl you worked with was an auto mechanic.
Yeah.
And he had a car that he built himself for towing purposes. It was a Plymouth car with a rumble seat. So it was a 2-seater in front and 2-seater in the rear.
But it was open
and
in the back.
It was an open rumble seat, yeah. There's no cover. You were outdoors. But he had a 1939 body on the Chrysler car, and he built it was a Plymouth car. The body was Plymouth, and he inserted a Chrysler motor into that. And it was a very powerful motor, but once you got the car started, it could pull anything. But the trouble is the motor was too strong for the starter. In those days, you'd have to push the car down a hill, get it to a certain speed, and let go of the clutch, and that would kick the car over to start if the battery wasn't strong enough. So quite often the weather was very cold in Chicago, and in the winter the motor was just too cold to start with the electrical motor. So I got the 2 guys to push me downhill, so I would always park on a downhill spot, turn the wheels into the curb so it wouldn't roll down, and then we'd get enough speed up that when I let go of the clutch, the motor would turn over and we could drive. So it was an hour's ride from our apartment if we went through the subway and elevated systems and the buses. We couldn't get from the north side of Chicago to the south side in one straight route except with a car. So they had agreed if I buy the car, they would pay the same amount of fare, which was 15 cents in those days, one way. So it was 30 cents each person we would put in to buy gas for the car. So for a couple of years, I drove them every day to school and back and forth. And we couldn't drive with each other because the car always somewhere along the line had to be pushed to get it started, so I would never go anyplace.
But that's
alone.
Where I learned to drive on
and
that
she
car.
learned how to drive
with a
on
clutch.
It, yeah.
So when I came back to New York and I had an automatic transmission, that was heaven.
But the car cost $105. That was the special price her friend got from her husband.
I worked at that time in the Loop. The very first thing we did when we moved to Chicago, because he had no money, was get me a job. Because I was a secretary and I didn't know how to travel around Chicago. So John went with me, and we went from place to place, and I got this job worked for Maharam Fabrics, which is a theatrical fabric and they had sets and sets. They made sets for different shows and fabrics that for costuming. I worked for them for about a year, and I would travel into the Loop, and once I knew how to do it, and that paid our living expenses because John was only making $105 a month.
GI Bill.
GI Bill. So I made a salary. Then I got a better job, and I was able to take the trolley to work, which was much easier. That was a better job. So I worked all the time that John went to school, but at night when I came home, since we only had one room, I couldn't listen to the radio. We didn't have television. But so I had to be quiet while he studied. And so I read every night, and it was very quiet and very lonely because I couldn't say a word. He was busy studying. But those were the years we went through all of this. We didn't have money. Parents weren't nearby. We did it all on our own, but we had fun. When you're young, you can go through those years, have a good time with friends. Everybody was in the same boat. Nobody had money. Nobody had, we couldn't go out to the movies. We couldn't go home and visit the family. But it worked out, and we had a good time. And then after 3 years, we came back. And it worked out to be fine. And that's why we're sitting in a condo in South Florida.